Today we're going to be talking about how to choose a therapist or counselor. So, if you type therapist near me into Google and hit enter, at least as of January 30th, 2023, over 3 billion results will pop up. If that isn't already incredibly overwhelming enough, you're then faced with the challenge of finding a good therapist. To make matters even more frustrating and difficult, you also need to find a good therapist who is specifically the right fit for you. So, one of the most important parts of finding a good therapist starts with your mindset or expectations. Let's compare therapy to dating. When you're dating, chances are slim that you expect the very first person you go out with to be your soulmate. You may not be thrilled with the dating process, but there's an understanding that you'll have to go on some amount of dates, potentially more than you want or thought, in order to find the right match. Dating costs money, effort, and a lot of your time. However, when the right people date at the right time, magic happens. And I don't just mean in the bedroom. Therapy can be similar to dating in terms of the process. It will cost you time, money, and a lot of effort to find a therapist. If there was a better way and an easier way to date and or choose a therapist, I tell you, I promise, there's no way around that reality. But once you find a good therapist online or in person, the work you can do together has the potential to be incredible. Something also worth noting is that the difficult and long process of finding a therapist isn't dissimilar to the work you'll do in therapy. Every single session won't be hard. If they were, no one would come to us. However, for most people, change is a slow, ongoing process. So if it's helpful, you can think of the search as part of the process or preparation for therapy instead of something that's getting in your way of starting. And you might be thinking, all right, that's great and all, but seriously, how do I choose a therapist or a counselor? Feel free to make a list of the following. Number 1, think about the demographics of the therapist you want to see. Do you want to see someone who is part of the LGBTQ plus community, part of the BIPOC community, cisgender, older, younger, etc.? Number 2, do you need to see someone who accepts your insurance? Are you willing and or able to pay someone out of pocket? Number 3, think about the setting, virtual or in person. Do you care if you ever see your therapist in person? Do you want to see them online but also still have the option to go to their office every now and again? Number 4, what particular issues do you want to have addressed? Maybe you want to see someone who is more of a generalist. It's also possible that if you are, for example, having trouble with anxiety, that you only want to see someone who is specifically trained to work with anxiety. If you're having a problem as a couple, you might decide to see a marriage and family therapist or MFT who specifically works well with couples and advertises that. Because in spite of having an MFT degree or MFT license, some therapists actually don't work well with couples or flat out don't see them at all. Number 5, what availability do you have? If your schedule isn't terribly flexible, you'll want to find someone who can see you during your limited availability. If your schedule is flexible, great. Use that to your advantage. Flex your lunch breaks, have a session while the kids are napping, see your therapist in between classes, etc. Number 6, is any of your previous list negotiable? It's hard to find a therapist in general, but it could become even more difficult once you've gotten incredibly specific in your desires and won't budge. You might be thinking, okay, Brie, why would you suggest making a list then? There's a method to my madness, I promise. The previous exercise can serve as a helpful starting point for a process that feels overwhelming. Now that you have the list, it could be a great time to think about what your non-negotiables are compared to your nice-to-haves. So that leads us to point number 7. In a search engine, you can type in something like anxiety therapist Los Angeles. With Google, once you've hit enter and have gotten some results back, you can narrow them down further by using the hours filter and or the rating filter. There will still be a lot of therapists to sort through, but at least you've already weeded out the hundreds of professionals whose businesses aren't open during the days and times you're available, along with those who don't treat anxiety. You'll want to refer back to that list you made earlier as you start clicking around on sites and or calling. In this example, you've narrowed it down to therapists who see clients with anxiety in LA, but maybe you still need to check to see if they accept insurance. Number 8, check with your insurance. Speaking of insurance, so if you have insurance, often they'll have a list of mental health providers online. The caveat, though, is that the list may not necessarily reflect whether or not a therapist is currently accepting clients. Number 9, you can give therapist directories a try. Some directories are Therapy for Black Girls, the Embody Lab, and Therapy Den. And there are also directories that specifically cater towards people who need lower fees, people who are looking for specific types of therapists. So you can Google search and play around with some search terms for that. Number 10, ask your loved ones. If someone you know is in therapy, or if you feel comfortable asking if they are, they might have someone that they highly recommend. Number 11, does your job have an employee assistance program or an EAP? If you're not sure, check in with human resources. If they do have an EAP, chances are they'll have a specific therapist they work with. One of the nice things is that EAP services are provided at a low cost. The downside is they do tend to be limited in the amount of sessions that an employee can have.